Hello, everybody, and happy World Sickle Cell Day. My name is OD. I am the executive director and founder of On the Air Sickled, and it is my pleasure to celebrate World Sickle Cell Day with you all. What a show we have for you. You do not want to miss it. It's all featuring the When They See Us participants, and all day long, social media has been blasting of all the different things, all the different programs, all the different celebrations related to sickle cell disease. And On the Air Sickled is not done yet. We have one more show for you all. We are live, and it's coming at you right now. Hello again, everybody. My name is OD, Executive Director and founder of On the Air Sickle. It is my pleasure to come to you with the final installation of the When They See Us campaign. Listen, for the last month and a half, I have been asking warriors to submit images of themselves, both in crisis and another one where they are celebrating or they're in joy or they're having a good time, whatever it is that they wanted to share. And so at the top of the show, you were able to see the participants that came in numbers. I mean, we had nearly 20 warriors to submit their images to On the Air Sickled, and they basically all said, listen, I want my face to be seen. I want the world to see who I am beyond the crisis. I want them to see me when I am feeling ill and when I am feeling great. And so that is what we did. At 10 o'clock this morning, I talked about why this all matters, why I chose When They See Us as our campaign title. And really, it all is for that purpose, to bring awareness to the greater community. And then at 1 o'clock this afternoon, we had a conversation with a licensed clinical social worker, Mr. and Dr. Kendall Moody. He talked about men's mental health. He talked about sickle cell mental health. He gave us strategies and tips to be able to implement when we're in crisis. I mean, what an awesome conversation we had. And then at the 4 o'clock hour, you were able to see the stories of all of the warriors that participated in the When They See Us campaign. I mean, people like our guest tonight, Justin Catalano. He is going to be joining us momentarily to tell his story. Justin participated in the When They See Us campaign. And for me, I gravitated towards him immediately. One, because he doesn't look like me. And two, because he has sickle cell disease. And I want to break the barriers that prevent us from labeling sickle cell as just an African American or Black disease. Our guest tonight comes with such knowledge and experience. He has fought to be here, and I'm so excited to introduce him. Before we get started, I want to make sure that I talk about our weather for today. It was a hot day today, y'all. I mean, 92 degrees, low of 67. It rained over here. We're starting late because the power went out. But how many of y'all know the show must go on? And so the show is going on. Tomorrow, same thing. It's going to be a hot day, 90 degrees, low of 68. So make sure that you get your water, make sure you stay hydrated, and make sure you have your medication on hand so that you don't end up in the emergency room. All right. But without further ado, I want to bring in our guest. Justin, you are live on the air. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on tonight.
Hey man, listen. I am so excited. I'm more excited because of the opportunity to really break the systematic barrier that comes with sickle cell disease. And I want to talk about your story. I want to talk about how did you find out? How did you find out that you had sickle cell, that you were part of our community? When did you find out?
All right. So I found out in 2018. I was 37 years old. I was basically brought into the hospital and I was basically dying. It was a wonderful weekend before this happened. One of my closest friends was having his bachelor party. He was getting married. I flew from California to New Jersey to see everybody and be a part of that. I was supposed to be in his wedding. We went. We started playing golf the first day. We were drinking on the golf course, and that night, we rented a big house, and we went back to the house, and I started feeling some pains. And now these pains that I was feeling and experiencing, it wasn't the first time I felt it. Like I've had this constantly throughout my life. I didn't know why it was happening. I just knew like it was bad. It was, and I had to kind of just like chill out. I stopped drinking. I smoked cannabis, so I was smoking a lot of cannabis, and drinking a lot of water, a lot of Gatorade, just because, I felt like I needed to. That night, even though I was drinking a ton, I wasn't able to go to the bathroom for like 24 hours, maybe even longer than that. And it was bad. So I didn't know what to do. I hopped in the shower and I was able to, urinate, and I was able to relieve myself, and I just kept going. We went back to my buddy's house after the weekend, and his wife, or the person he was marrying, she is a nurse, a registered nurse, and she was like, you got to bring him to the hospital. Something's wrong, And I was like, nah, I don't want to go to the hospital. I went to the hospital lots of times in life, and the doctors were like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. We don't see anything. You don't have any physical signs of pain. What are you talking about? And so I was very reluctant on going to the hospital. I was like, it's going to pass. Just bring me back to my parents' house. And so my buddy brought me back to my parents' house. At that point, I wasn't even aware that happened. He tells me him and my father carried me up the stairs, and my parents saw this happen to me many a times, maybe not at this extreme level. And, they put me into bed. They got me, water, and they just, a heating pad. And because the heating pad usually worked for the pain. And I guess I went into a closet and I urinated in the closet. And my parents were like, whoa, what the heck is going on with this guy? There's something really wrong. We've never seen him this bad. So they called an ambulance. They sent me to the hospital. And in the hospital, they, I guess they took blood. And at first, they thought I might have had leukemia because my white blood cell count was like really, really low. Maybe, I don't even know the number, but it was super low. And they started doing tests on me. They did an MRI, they did a CAT scan, they did a spinal tap, they did a bone marrow biopsy. And then, and I guess in the meantime, they were conversing with my parents. My mother always knew she had thalassemia, or beta thalassemia. And then they started talking to my dad and was like, oh, we know she has this. Where's your family from? And he's like, oh, everybody's from Sicily. And I guess one of the doctors was like, oh man, both of these parents are from Sicily. I got to check deeper into this blood thing. And then, he discovered, he was like, oh my goodness, he has sickle cell disease. And then immediately they asked my parents, we have to give him a full body blood transfusion because he's dying right now. And, it's up to you guys make the choice, because I was delirious. I didn't even know any of this was going on. So I wake up a few days later and they tell me, they're like, you have sickle beta thalassemia. And I was shocked. I was like, wow, that's interesting. I assumed that was a black person's disease. And they were like, oh, well, it's majority of people that are black or African have this, but people from the Mediterranean have this. People from India have this. People from China have this. So it was a real eye-awakening experience, because like I woke up and they told me this and I was like, holy crap. They treated me horribly growing up when I went to the hospital. I can only imagine the horrible things and the experiments that they do to black people with this disease, because, nobody talks about this. It's not something that, is known really. And lots of things started clicking. I had my son in 2013. Okay, so this is 5 years prior. I had my son, and I had him with a black woman. And when he was born in California, they pricked his foot and they took his blood and they came back and said, oh, he has the sickle cell trait. Me being ignorant at the time, I just chopped it up. I was like, oh, he got that from his mom. Okay. And I never looked into it, but when I woke up out of this situation in the hospital, I was like, damn, I called her up and I was like, you remember that the doctors told us that he has the trait? Do you have sickle cell, or does anyone in your family have that? And she's like, nah, nobody has that. And I was like, well, I have that. And she was like, no way, man, that's just wild. That because she was kind of like didn't understand how our son got that, because she knew that she didn't have it. But we didn't know like how the math works when people breed and make new humans, that you need two people with the trait to make the problem. Now, when I woke up, the doctor even told my father, he was like, you have the sickle cell trait, and if you don't, you're not this man's father. And, my dad, kind of laughed at that because he knew that he was my father. But at 71 years old, he went and he got tested. And sure enough, he has the trait. And so my mother has the beta thalassemia. My father has the sickle cell trait. I was born in New Jersey in 1981. They were not testing babies for that in New Jersey. Now, my parents both come from New York, but they moved to New Jersey before any of the kids were born. So if I was born in New York in 81, they would have discovered this. Or if I was born in California, because those two states did test the babies. I just happened to be in New Jersey and they weren't doing that. So that's how I found out. It was I was basically on my deathbed, and they exhausted all resources to try to figure out, why is this pretty much healthy, fit young man dying right now,
Wow.
And that was that. So
I tell you, this
crazy.
This experience, I mean, I'm really like intrigued, because to hear your story, first of all, you're like, hey, I had a child with a black woman, and sure enough, my child got this from her, and she didn't like like it's just the dynamic of the understanding is really crazy, because it's not communicated effectively, right?
Not at all.
And I always said that it needs to be on a shirt, and it probably is, but sickle cell is a blood disease, not a black disease. I mean, and there's so many different variations of it, and you're just a testimony to that very fact, that it doesn't matter what your upbringing was, it doesn't matter, where you come from. There's a potential that if you're not tested, you could be a trait carrier, and you should be able to have that. So it's funny, right? Because we're talking about these misconceptions. I just had a conversation with my mother, and my mom said that only a few years ago did she realize that people with the trait could actually have crisis episodes. And I was like, yeah, Ma, like, people really need to dig into this and really understand it. I mean, now people are starting to, but you're a prime testimony of, man, I thought this wasn't about me, but it is.
Yeah, and then if you go back and look at the history of things, Sicily is an island in the Mediterranean. It's close to Africa. It's close to the Middle East. And at a certain point in the history of time, that was a main trading route. So there was tons of people that came through there. There was tons of different people that took that country over. The Moors took that country over at one point. So the people of Sicily are more dark-skinned than your average northern Italian. Most of them have dark features, dark eyes, dark skin, So, just kind of doing research after the fact, it's like, okay, it does make sense that happens. If people from all different nations were coming and traveling and mating, and you know, whether they were forcibly mating with others or they, you know, or not. It was, you know, a place that took place, you know, and I guess today a lot of people are very mixed nowadays, and it just so happened that both sides of my parents, you know, both of my parents come from the same island, you know, in another country, you know, because I'm not a first gen, I'm a third gen Italian American. My great grandparents came here, and so, you know, to be so you know, so connected to that country, it's I'm probably more rare than the majority of people in America, because it's, you know, everything's mixed up at this point. Yeah. You know, and you know, both of my parents, they look normal, healthy people. So if they took me to the hospital, a doctor looking at them probably wouldn't even think about that, you know?
Yeah.
That oh, well, maybe we should check for that. And I remember growing up, it was very rare that they even took blood from me when I'd go into the hospital with a pain crisis, you know? Yeah. The majority of my life as a young person, and I'm saying like around 8 to 20 something, okay, 23, 24, the doctors would tell me, oh, it's just growing pains. Okay. You know, because it went away after a little while. It was pretty quick. It would last, and when I was young, it would only last a few days, right? But then when I got into my 20s and I'd go to the hospital and complain about this, and they tried to say, oh, it's growing pains or my sciatic nerve or something, I started kind of being like, I don't know, man. Like, this is intense. I should be like 7 foot tall if you're telling me this is growing pains, you know? I'm not even 6 foot. I'm like 5'10". So you're telling me this is growing pains, I should be a monster, you know? And I'm not that, you know, I'm not that big, you know? So I felt like they were just brushing me off, and a lot of times I'd go in there looking like a mess, you know? And so they assumed that I was like, oh, you want some drugs or something, or you want some pain medication. And I'm like, no, I don't want anything. I want this pain to stop. I don't know what the heck is going on. I just want it to stop, you know? And they would give me weak medicine, you know, maybe naproxen or something like that. That stuff never worked, right? I started smoking cannabis at 14 years old, just for fun with my friends, you know. But I always had it. So when I was, you know, probably 15, 16 years old, and I'd catch a crisis, or the pain, I didn't know it was a crisis at the time, but I was experiencing the pain. You know, it always started in my legs, and then it'd creep up into my back. And, you know, I was just at a point when I was at that age, and I was like, you know what? I'm sparking up in my room, man, because it gave me relief. You know, even though my parents were super against it, they, you know, they saw that it gave me relief, and they were like, wow. We don't want him doing this, but we don't like seeing him suffer, and there's nothing that anybody has ever done to help him. If it's helping him, I guess let's just let him rock, you know? And that was what helped me. I was able to rest. I was able to control my breathing. I was able to eat. I was able to drink. And by being able to do all those things, I was able to recover within a few days, you know?
Wow. That's insightful, actually.
And I'm not saying that everyone that has this should use it, because smoking's probably not good. It might exacerbate something else. But for me, that I had no other I mean, I might have had other options, but that was the option that I used because it seemed to work. And when you're experiencing that pain, I mean, you got to do what you got to do, right? I mean, when I was young, I was like, man, can you just cut my leg off? Like, I don't want this pain anymore. That's what I wanted. That, like, just chop them off. I don't want to deal with this pain. And that would have been kind of crazy if that actually happened, like taking my legs off. Then where else would the pain have went? Now it would have went into my arms, and then I had to chop everything off. But
so there's a question, and then before we get to the question from the audience members, I wanna draw the point of you made two major points. You said that this was working for you, and I think that most doctors will say, hey, let's use this strategy because it worked with this patient, and let's use this strategy because it worked with this patient. And so it's a one size fits all approach to care. And really it needs to be everyone, being seen as the individual person. Right. I'm going to ask my team if they could put the question. I saw Chardonnay ask a question. Can you explain a bit more about your experience with beta thalassemia?
I don't know the difference, to be honest with you, because I have them both. So I'm not sure if I'm experiencing the same pain that a person with beta thalassemia has, or I'm having the same pain that a sickle cell patient has. I mean, the pain that I experience is, my visualization is I have glass flowing through my veins with electrical current pulsating and shocking me and basically jabbing me every time I breathe. And I don't know if that's the same as what you experience when you're going through a crisis, but that's in my mind, that's what I'm visualizing going through my body, is just like shards of glass just scraping the insides of me and pulsating with electrical current, just being shocked over and over, So,
wow.
And I've only recently started meeting other warriors, because I didn't know. I only found out 7 years ago. I just recently moved back to New York. I was living in California for the past 15 years. After I found out that I had this, I lived in a county called Calaveras County. It's about an hour and a half east of Sacramento. Elevation's about 2,800 foot elevation. I was experiencing, after I found out that I had this, I was experiencing probably one every other month. It got bad, and the area where I was living was definitely not conducive to this disorder. It's a 95% white area, so they had no clue about this. I'd go to the hospital there, they'd be like, I don't know, we don't know what to do.
Oh my
God. I finally got someone to take me to UC Davis in Sacramento, because it's a big hospital and it's a diverse area. They were more than happy to take me, because they were like, oh wow, we never seen anybody like you. And they wanted to try all types of stuff on me. But they at least gave me they gave me care, but if I had a crisis, I wasn't able to get there unless somebody actually drove me down there. Because it was an hour and a half away. So the ambulance wouldn't take me there. The few times I went to the hospital that was close to where I was living, they shot me with something and they let me go. They said, you're good, go home. I had to figure out how to get home. It was like, all right, I guess, so yeah, it was a wild experience that I've had, in UC Davis, they the one doctor I had, he was cool. I mean, he was like, "Have you ever taken any pain medications?" I was like, "I haven't. I've never taken anything." He's like, "All right, well, usually I give, my patients with sickle cell morphine or oxycodone." He's like, "Do you want me to give you some of those?" I said, "Yeah, I might as well. I'll try it." I mean,
Right.
when you're going through the pain, and if the weed's not helping enough, sure, I'm gonna try something else. If that's what you say that people use, and I was able to experiment with those things when I was having the crisis, and because I never was able to get pain medication, my pain tolerance is through the roof, right? So like, I never needed to, like, I don't have to abuse these drugs that they gave me because I lived my whole life without having these things, and I always relied on the cannabis. So, for me to just all of a sudden start popping pills, that's not even in my, that's not my style. I've never really been into that kind of stuff. I experimented with things as a kid and everything, but, being grown, I already knew, I've seen people fall victim to all types of drugs. Just being in an area that I grew up in, people got addicted to all types of stuff, and I was like, I'm not going to be involved with that. So I was able to get pain medications, and they work. I found that for me, oxycodone works better than morphine. I talked to a pain management doctor, and I was like, "Why is that?" Because I thought morphine was a stronger drug. He's like, "No, morphine is not as strong as oxycodone." I was like, "All right, that makes sense," and so I found that one relieves me better,
I wanna
go.
I wanna talk about the difference here, and I think it's important for the audience to know, because we're talking about, and because you had to correct me actually during the campaign. I think so. Just for everybody to know, anybody that participated in the When They See Us campaign was they were offered a certificate for participation and basically a flyer that they could post onto their social media platforms that says, I participated in When They See Us for World Sickle Cell Day. And I put, for Justin, when I made his flyer, I put beta thalassemia. And you had to say, actually, it's sickle beta thalassemia. And so just for the audience to know the difference here, I have SS, which is said to be one of the most severe kinds. Then there's SC, and those two genotypes are well known, right? So it's like, oh, you have SS or you have SC, but we don't talk about beta thalassemia. We don't talk about sickle beta thalassemia. And so beta thalassemia is a genetic blood disorder that reduces the production of hemoglobin caused by mutations in the hemoglobin gene, leading to low or absent production of beta globin chains. So two major types: beta thalassemia trait minor, which is a carrier, right? Usually asymptomatic or mild anemia. Then there's beta thalassemia major, also known as Cooley's anemia, severe anemia requiring regular transfusions. And then there's beta thalassemia intermedia, which is a milder than the major, but it still requires treatment. And so sickle beta thalassemia, which is what you have, is a compound condition. The person inherits one sickle cell gene, hemoglobin S, from one parent, and one beta thalassemia gene from the other. There are two types. There's beta 0, there's beta plus, beta 0, no normal beta globin production, and often as severe as sickle cell anemia SS. And so it seems like what you're describing is like almost like a beta 0, where you're having these pains and you're having these sensations that, it's something that I go through. And it's wild how you talk about an electric shock, because I always say, I always tell my wife, babe, I feel like I'm having like this electric this striking pain, or I say, if you imagine someone hitting a bat to your knees over and over and over and over again without relief, so we just describe it differently, but you described it so similarly to how I feel pain, and we have two different diagnoses. And I just thought that was really, our slogan here is Aaron, the good, the bad, and the ugly in the name of awareness and advocacy. And this is the awareness portion, right? We need to get this information out to the community that says, hey, look, it's not a Black disease. There are different types. It's more than SS and SC, right? And, it's more than a trait, situation. It can be, very excruciating pain. It could be very limiting to what we can and cannot do. You talked about your childhood and how you try to hang out with friends and, had to be very selective of the decisions that you made. And all of that just is like, wow. I mean, for us to, and I started off the same way. I said, I was attracted to this story because I'm like, you don't look like me. And this breaks the barrier of it all. It breaks the barrier of it all. And so I'm really appreciative of you being here. I do want to, because we're running short on time here, but I do want to offer up the opportunity for you to speak to our audience members. And so this is typically something that I do where, I get off the screen and I put you on the spotlight. This is your story. Justin, you are live on the air with On the Air Sickle.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. What would you like to say to the audience members, my friend?
What are we doing?
Whatever you want to say to the audience members.
Oh, okay. Just freeing it. All right.
Yeah.
Well, a part of me is grateful that I didn't find out what I had until later on in life. I was able to live a pretty decent childhood. I played outside a lot. I ran around in the woods. I rode my bike hard. I played soccer. I wrestled. I wasn't a big sports guy. I did like to skateboard a lot when I was a kid. And in my teenage years, I lived a pretty good life, I did some traveling with my family. We would go different places. When I was young, they would take me down to Florida. And Florida was the only place that I liked going in the water. Growing up, lots of friends and different camps that I'd go to, they'd have pools or a lake. And I hated it. I hated going in the water because it was always so cold. It didn't matter if it was 100 degrees outside. I'd stick my toe in the water to see if it was warm. Instantly, I was good. I was cooled down just off of just touching the water, and I wouldn't go in. And my friends and other people, they crack jokes with me, and but. That was an interesting thing. I always tried to get out of going in the water. And I remember in camp when I was probably like, 12. It was up in New Hampshire. It was a sleepaway camp, and they had this lake, and we had to go in the lake every single day, and I hated it. It was so cold, the water, and it made me feel like I was going to die every time I went in there. And then one summer I was in the woods and we were doing something, and I picked up a rock and I dropped the rock on my hand, smashed my finger open, and I had to go to the hospital and get stitches. And for the rest of the summer I didn't have to go into the lake. So that was a great experience. I mean, making a bad thing into a good thing. And like I said, when I was around 14 years old, I started consuming cannabis. And I guess I'll revert back a little bit further. When I was probably 4 or 5 years old, even younger than that, my mother said I never really liked eating meat. So by the time I was 5 or 6, I'd started giving them a lot of trouble with eating meat. They were always trying to convince me to eat meat. By the time I was 6 or 7, my family finally gave up on it, and they just allowed me to be a vegetarian. And I would like to say I consider that part of a saving grace for me. You know, I feel like being a vegetarian, I was able to have thinner blood. So my crisis didn't last as long. When I, you know, growing up, they were able to dissipate somewhat fast, even though I didn't know that that's what I was experiencing. But I recognized the pain that I always had. You know, so today, my wife is an alkaline vegan, and because I've been a vegetarian my whole life, being more alkaline vegan or vegan, it was an easier transfer to me, and just discovering that I feel helps. And then going back to the cannabis, you know, I started using it around 14 years old. And then around 15, 16, when I would get a crisis, at that point, I didn't even mind my parents knowing that I used that, because it gave me relief. And, you know, so the diet that I chose at a young age, or I gravitated towards, and the herbal medicine that I used, I just gravitated towards that kind of stuff. And I feel like those things all helped in my journey. You know, today I try to consume a herbal tea that my wife makes for me. I'm not sure all of the different herbs that she uses, but I do know sarsaparilla is one of them, and it's something that, you know, helps build the iron up in your system. And some people told me that that wasn't good for me, but I have a hard time listening to the medical field, because they basically didn't help me most of my life, and I had to figure all these things out on my own. And so I take what they say as a grain of salt, and I do my own research, and I feel like the teas that I've been drinking are definitely very beneficial to me. Over the past 2 years, I've really only had maybe 2 crises, and that's amazing, because before I found out that I had this disease, I would probably get 2 to 4 a year, guaranteed. And after I found out I had the disorder, I was getting them every other month. And I was like, dang, what the heck happened? You know, is it because I got older? Is it because of where I'm living, the elevation? Because after I found out what I had, the doctors told me, well, you need to stay hydrated, stay away from extreme temperatures and high altitudes. So I'm not sure if living at the 3,000 foot elevation was a problem or not. But, you know, I decided to make the move back to the East Coast, to where I have a support system. My wife's family is from here, and it's been an easy air transition. I guess yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what else to speak on of these things.
That's perfect. Listen,
you know, the diet I feel helps a lot. Oh, there was one other thing I would like to mention, though. There was a time I moved to California in 2010, San Francisco, and I lived there until 2000. I lived in San Francisco and Oakland between the years of 2010 and 2013. Now, my entire life, I've experienced these pains. And because I didn't know I had this at that time, I didn't really pay attention as much. I just knew that it happened. But those 3 years that I lived in that area, in the Bay Area in California, after being diagnosed, I went through the mental Rolodex and all the different times that I remembered feeling those pains. Most of the time it was because I was dehydrated. But that block that I lived in that area for those 3 years, for 2 of those years, I did not experience that pain one time. And that was very significant in my mental Rolodex because, I was, my friends that I grew up with that moved out there with me, they saw this happen to me growing up in life. And that was the only time. And they even remember, they were like, man, you did pretty good this year. You didn't have no back pains and this, that. And I was like, yeah, man, I didn't. And, so now I'm starting to realize like that certain places are more beneficial for us than others. I love the heat.
Yeah.
The cold is no good for me. I was kind of nervous about moving back to New York because of the winter, but I was all right. I had a little spill. But the place that I'm being seen now by the hematologist has an infusion center. So when I started feeling a little funky, I called her up and I said, hey, can I try this? And she was like, yeah, sure, come right in. And it wasn't an emergency room place. It was just a nice, comfortable space. They had a really cool chair that they put me in. They hooked up an IV to me. And it was just really relaxing. And I got one bag of I guess saline solution. And they asked, do you want any more? And they had food and snacks there and drinks. And I was like, no, I'm feeling pretty good. Like they were like, okay, if you want, you could go home or we can give you some more. And that was that. So it was nice that when I came back here, I was more prepared and I was able to get into a place that has something like that. Because my last experience in the emergency room was garbage. And it was at UC Davis where my good hematologist was. But like a month prior, he switched me to another hematologist who, for whatever reason, had a liking to wanting to study me. And she was like, oh, don't worry. If you have to come to the hospital, I'll come and see you. I'll make sure that you get taken care of. Man, I was in the emergency room for like 7 hours struggling before they put me into a room. And that was part of the reason I never went to the hospital, because you got me sitting in this uncomfortable ass place and, you're not helping me. I'd rather be dying at home if I'm going to die, because at least I could be smoking or consuming cannabis on my own terms and in my own bed, being comfortable, or just being in my own space, being comfortable, And so, life is tricky, and I try to look at the positives of everything, and I don't take this disorder as a real negative aspect of my life. I feel like it's a neat thing to tell people and be able to share my experience, because I had to deal with it by myself for such a long time. Not necessarily totally by myself, because my parents were very supportive of the situation, but they didn't know what we had. They didn't know I had this. My father didn't know he had the trait. He didn't know that he passed this on to me. My mom knew she had the thalassemia, but we never connected it until I almost died, essentially. And and now it's kind of now my mother worries a lot more than she used to, because now she saw what happened and she doesn't ever want to see that again. You don't want to see your kid going through this. This is not, you don't ever want to see your kid going through pain anyway. So I appreciate you allowing me to tell my story, and other people get to experience it because, it's a wild ride out there, man. And, I'm grateful that I've been able to live such a good life. And I feel, like I said, I feel like the health, the way that I eat, the way that I take care of my body has helped me be, the warrior that I am. Because, I feel like a strong person still. Not as strong as I was when I was in my 20s, but
That's
it's
all right.
all good.
We still make it through. We still make
Right.
it through.
You know.
Hey, listen, ladies and gentlemen, this has been On the Air Sickled. And Justin, I'm so happy that you had an opportunity to share your story with us. I'm going to put you into the green room. I'm going to ask my team to put you into the green room. And we are going to close out the show. But special thank you for one, participating in the When They See Us campaign. Thank you for being so vulnerable. And thank you for being part of On the Air Sickled.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been my pleasure to be able to do this campaign. I've gotten to know so many people that I never connected with that are so eager to share their story. And hopefully very soon our team will be able to reconnect with these individuals that participated in the When They See Us campaign and get them live on the air. You see, it is one thing to be able to tell our story, but when you're able to see us, I mean, really see us, we change the dynamic of the perception that is sickle cell. And so a special thank you to our production team here at On the Air Sickled, my guest acquisition manager, Jalen Snyder, my screen director, Marcus Brown, our board members, our board president, my wife, Chardonnay. These are the moments that make this so spectacular and so special. And so special thank you to Justin and his family as well for being part of this experience. Listen, you too can be a part of On the Air Sickled. Just because we had this campaign doesn't mean that On the Air Sickled suddenly ends. You have an opportunity to share your story. Simply go to www.ontheairsickled.com today. Go to the website, click the Share My Story link, and you could be the next guest live on the air. Before we go, I do want to make sure that I share our 3-layered vision with you all. Listen, our goal here at On the Air Sickled is to air the good, the bad, the ugly in the name of awareness and advocacy. And that takes your financial contribution. Okay. Money makes the mission. All right. So here at On the Air Sickled, we have a 3-layered vision for continued growth and development. All right. To support sickle cell research. I mean, how phenomenal was it to hear Justin's story, to learn a little bit more about sickle beta thalassemia, to learn about the techniques that he used that work for him. I mean, we need to really invest in sickle cell research so that we can make a safer community and educate everyone on the possibilities of care. Okay. And then the last thing that is very special to my heart is the Flip the Bill campaign. All right. For Justin, and for other warriors who are dealing with this battle every day. It is very, very hard to navigate the patient care that we need, as well as navigating our own financial needs. Okay, so imagine for a moment a father who is fighting sickle cell disease, is placed in the hospital, and is unable to provide for his family for a week at a time, maybe 2 weeks at a time. Wouldn't it be nice to have a place where you can tell your story and that organization can support you financially for about a week to put groceries on the table, maybe even to flip the bill for a primary care visit or a surgical procedure? Donate to On the Air Sickled. Your money will not go on bad ground. I'm telling you, we have a mission to make a difference. You can simply donate to PayPal at On the Air Sickled OD at any monetary gift of any kind. Your donation will save a life. Also, we are live on YouTube for this campaign. Please make sure that you subscribe to our channel. Click the notification. Don't miss a single episode of On the Air Sickled. You could be the next guest on the show, or maybe the next guest on the show might give you something that might help you navigate sickle cell. Special thank you to Sickle Cell Medical Advocacy, who is our partner. Sickle Cell Medical Advocacy is an opportunity for everyone with sickle cell disease. Have them go with you into the fight to navigate your care, to speak to the doctors and to the nurses on your behalf. You can connect with SCMA at www.sicklecellmedicaladvocacy.org today. Also, our newest partner for On the Air Sickled, Shift Humanity. Grayson Sorrell is the author and founder of Shift Humanity. She joined our podcast as we led into When They See Us for World Sickle Cell Day, talking about navigating your inner world to generate positive societal impact. And so she is also a partner here with On the Air Sickled. She is Amazon's #1 bestseller author. And you can connect with her at graysonsorrell.com today. Get your copy of Shift Humanity right now. Listen, it has been my pleasure to provide you the good, the bad, the ugly in the name of awareness and advocacy. It's a hot couple of days, ladies and gentlemen. Please stay warm. Get your waters. Stay hydrated. The weather is on the screen. High of 92 today, low of 67, and tomorrow will be around 90 degrees. So you want to make sure that you stay hydrated. Thank you all for tuning in for When They See Us. Let's take another look at the participants for the 2025 campaign.